Morning, everyone. This is the Community and Economic Development Committee, February 18th, 21. Mandy, can you go ahead and do the roll call?
Yes. Mr. Weddleton?
I'm here.
Miss Kennedy?
Here.
Mr. Peterson?
Present.
Mr. Constant?
Here.
Mr. Dunbar?
Here.
Miss Salatel?
Here.
And for non-committee members, Mr. Rivera? Mr. Perez Verdia? Miss Allard? Miss LaFrance? And then for public joining, let's see. So I show also from the police department, Steve Dunn, code enforcement, yes. Jack Frost. I have interpretation staff, Jamie and Gina. And that is who I show currently on. So Chair,
do we have any public on the phone?
I just have one popping in, and it says guests, so I don't have a name. So whoever just came in through Teams, if you'd like to introduce yourself for the record.
Hi, this is Jana Waltine. I just came in, but I thought I had my name on there, so I'm not sure if it was me that you saw.
Yeah, I think it is for some reason popping up as guest, so.
Weird. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. All right, thank you, chairs.
Okay, so we should have someone from Health Department here too, shortly, so we'll watch that. Okay, Crystal, you wanted to speak?
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to bring up something that I thought was really interesting. I don't know how many of you have been watching, but in about 2.5 hours, we have a Mars exploration spacecraft landing on Mars, the Perseverance. And I just wanted to say that they will be deploying several experimental systems and equipment. And one of those, called MOXIE, which actually converts CO2 to oxygen, is being deployed there and tested. And MOXIE was developed by one of our very own graduates from Chugiak High School, Forrest Mayan, class of 2007. And so I just thought that was actually pretty appropriate for community and economic development, right? They're working on trying to see how we develop Mars. So I just thought that was interesting that we have one of our very own smart guys, one of our smart kids from this community that is basically putting his, so far, his life's work on Mars today. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair. Well, that's amazing.
Mr.
Yeah. Sure, Chris, go ahead.
I just would amend what Ms. Kennedy you just said, and it's actually going to be in approximately 45 minutes. They're going to be 11:15 in Pacific time, and then they start the whole production of showing it at 10:15. So I have it streaming actually. So great minds think alike, and
yeah,
it starts in 40 minutes.
Yeah, he's upstairs watching it too, and we've had 11:50 as the time. So
yeah, it says right now 10:15 is when it kicks off, and 11:15 is when it hits. But I don't know.
So make a note to pause for a moment at that point. Do we know if it lands well? And then we start terraforming.
Yeah, Chris can keep us updated. He's watching.
It's sitting here streaming. Yep.
Okay.
Congrats, Chugiak.
Yeah, that's exciting. Well, good. Well, thank you for that. So we have an agenda before us. THC, continuing proposed changes to marijuana code, and then budget revisions. Anybody have anything to add or change? I don't hear anything, so we should, I think, dive right in, a discussion on proposed changes to THC. I'm a little worried we don't have anyone from the health department that I see here.
Can I ask?
But I know we expect them. Yeah, Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, do we actually at the municipal level regulate the percentage of THC in a product? Is that in our code anywhere?
Through the chair, this is Mandy. Honest, yes, it is listed, but we mimic the state currently. So we
Yep.
have the regulations in Title 10 of what the max servings are.
That's in regulation, though, not in code.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And Assembly Member Weddleton, I am, this is Heather, Anchorage Health Department. I think I'm on the wrong link, but I am here.
Oh, we see you there. So I think you are in now. Thanks. Okay. So on this discussion, I guess I think part of the goal was, we have this in front of us. This seems pretty important. And we have not in the past sent in comments to AMCO on proposed changes, but we have time to do this one. I think their deadline is early March. So my sense is we're getting educated now to possibly send in some comments, either pro or con, or, to revise a proposal. So I think for starters, Ms. Harris, why don't you go ahead and do you want to, the health department's looked at it and have some thoughts?
Yes, Member Weddleton, I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit. First, I'd like to just disclose one item, a personal connection. My sister is Lacey Wilcox, who is the Alaska Marijuana Industry Association president. And so as I share this information around the health department recommendation and conversation and what we're able to share on this perspective, I also just want to highlight and disclose that item, as well as the fact that our health department team helped to prepare this recommendation and others helped support this process.
All right, thank you. Any comments from the committee on that? Okay, don't hear
I would just say
anything.
thank you for the disclosure. Just thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So from the health department perspective, we do not necessarily support these changes due to the potential health impacts on public health. We're concerned about some of the higher concentration levels posing greater risks to the public, specifically around marijuana-related poison control call concerns. In 2017, we saw that Alaska, that there were, for people under the age of 20, there was an increase of over 75% of calls to the Poison Control Center related to marijuana devices and substances. Also in Michigan, where the state has allowed the highest THC content in edibles, they saw an increase of over 600% increase in the number of poison control reports of children who ingested the THC edibles between 2017 and 2018. We're also concerned about the perceived risk around edibles for youth. We've seen that there continues to be a decrease in the perceived health risks, and that is true for our youth here in Alaska. We also were able to just also recognize that there are some complications, unknowns around this. Alaska and Oregon are the only states that are providing 500 milligrams per serving and 50 milligrams in a single packet. Massachusetts allows the 5 milligrams per serving, but 100 milligrams in a single packet. And several of our other states, Washington, Colorado, California, Maine, Nevada, Vermont, and Illinois, allow 10 milligrams per serving and 100 milligrams in a single packet. So we recognize that Alaska is currently in the conservative side of what we see on a national scale. And from the health department perspective, we really do feel, as we did some of this research, that the data is still lacking. And we're paying close attention to that and trying to evaluate the data that might be available around this.
Mr. Chair, you have a couple people in the queue.
Okay.
Who might have questions.
Sure. Sorry, switch over to that. Oop, I got lost here. Crystal, call on the first person in the queue for me while I stumble around.
Sure,
here.
that would be Ms. Zolotel.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair Ms. Kennedy. So I have 3 questions. And the first 2 are related to the health department and the other one is more industry related. So on those percentages, that percentage increase you mentioned from 2017, do we have more current data as to what potential trend there may be with that data up to 2020? And what is the percentage jump from? So if we started and we had a percentage increase, what was the baseline to how many calls with regard to marijuana? The second piece there being, shoot, should have wrote these down. You mentioned, the increase in poison control calls in Michigan, and I guess I'm not certain how that relates to Alaska. I guess I'm missing the nexus there. And then the last is, to what extent, if we go with a concentration different than the state option, from a manufacturing or production perspective, and this might be something we have to set aside till we're done with the health department, but I don't want to forget it. What complications might we encounter or cost to the industry? I just kind of want that perspective as well. Thanks.
Absolutely. So the percentage increase, if I could just have a few minutes to go back to the original data set to be able to speak further on that. I'd love to circle back on that topic in a few minutes when I'm able to do that. As far as the Michigan allowable the Michigan connection and the increase of poison control reports, that was one of our concerns around the policy recommendation, was really that we started to see an increase in local marijuana related poison center calls in 2017. And we're concerned is this increase in the allowable THC levels, that will also exponentially move us in a space where we're going to continue to see an increase in poison-related calls.
May I ask a follow-up on that last point, please?
Sure, go ahead.
I'm having a hard time making that connection, and maybe it's further in your data when you pull it up, but are you saying that in Michigan, when they increased the THC levels, they saw an increase in calls due to the increase in THC potency, or is that data not broken down to that extent? I just want to see if what is it, correlation versus causation? Because I think that there's that data we really need to understand exactly what it's suggesting. So that's what I'm trying to understand.
Absolutely. So Michigan, the state with the highest allowable THC content, states that they saw an over 600% increase in the number of poison control related reports of children who ingested THC edibles between those time periods, when recreational marijuana sales were legalized in the state.
Okay, I see. So at the point of legalization, they saw the increase, but it wasn't necessarily due to any changes in the THC content or concentration.
Great point. Yes. So they, it does sound like they made it legal when marijuana sales were legalized in the state. That's when they saw the 600% increase.
Okay. Yeah. And then that's what really drives my question that you're going to look up is see, because that's about the time of earlier in legalization versus now. So I'm kind of curious how that data trends. Thank you so much. That's very helpful.
Absolutely.
All right, thanks, Meg. Chris, you're in the queue?
Yep, thank you. 2 questions. One of them probably will follow Ms. Alato's question over to more data. So, in Alaska, the 75% increase, can you please provide us real numbers, actual cases? And then the Michigan concern, it's very interesting because their per dose cannabis is actually our whole package dosage. And so essentially they have at this time 10 times the amount of THC per product. And if we increase, it will just be 5 times what ours are. And so using Michigan as an example is a pretty big scarecrow for what we're talking about here. And so I would like the real numbers as opposed to the percentages, because if we're talking 5, then I'm not sure that the fear is worth buying into, having lived through the late stages of American prohibition. It's easy to put fear out there and not facts. So let's get the numbers, please.
Yep, happy to get that. And I can send that in a follow-up as well with links to the data sets.
All right, thank you. Crystal?
Thank you. And I just wanted to add that I had this conversation yesterday with Chief Hetrick from the Anchorage Fire Department while we were getting ready for our Public Safety Committee meeting for next month. And she is looking into the data. She said they know they have a lot of 911 marijuana overdose calls, and a lot of those involve children. So they are looking for those statistics as well. So I'm sure they'll coordinate somewhat with the health department, but just know that the Anchorage Fire Department is looking at it from a 911 response perspective, and that data should be coming shortly. Thanks.
All right, thank you. So Crystal, shortly means during our meeting today or next few days?
No, I doubt it. I doubt it will be today. If you remember, the data person for the Anchorage Fire Department has just recently been hired. So I would suspect that it would be, a couple weeks. I'm hoping that we have it by the public safety meeting on March the 3rd.
Do you expect to address this issue at the public safety meeting?
We have it on our agenda kind of tentatively, mostly because, like I said, some of that data Chief Hetrick is working on. So I wanted to give her that opportunity. So yeah, we'll probably have it on our agenda as well. Thanks.
Okay, we might think about complications there. I mean, if we have everybody having 2 discussions on this, I don't know that it's a problem, but many of us are here. I think the public safety is committee of the whole.
Correct.
It'd be more streamlined to have one committee look at it, but here we are, which is fine. So okay, and that will be very good information to see. Thanks. Pete, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And when the initiative first passed, they decided not to separate medical marijuana from recreational marijuana sales, and many of the people that are using legalized marijuana for medical reasons use the products we're talking about, the products that have 5 milligrams, and we're trying to go up to 10 milligrams. But anyway, I've been actually, since the very beginning, I've had people that are using it for medical purposes tell me that the 5 milligrams is basically does nothing for them. And so they would have to double up. And then when they considered the expense, it was, they were complaining about maybe it being much more expensive that way. And so I'm actually surprised that it's taken us this long to get to the point where we're having this discussion about raising it from 5 milligrams to 10 milligrams. Anyway, thanks.
All right, thanks, Pete. Okay, so Ms. Harris, are you? I guess you've given us your points, and then you're going to get back to us on a few. So
Happy to do that.
Okay, and so let's move on. Officer Dunn, would you like to? Do you have something to report or feedback for us?
I do. Yes, thank you. Yep, I do. Yes, thank you. Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, thanks for the invite. I'm a traffic fatality investigator for the Anchorage Police Department. In addition to that, I'm a drug recognition expert. So I get involved in cases where folks have been arrested for impaired driving, and they're under the influence of drugs or medication, or in addition to alcohol. As far as the law enforcement perspective, we definitely don't support this change because it will substantially impact public safety. I mean, if you look at alcohol, besides alcohol, marijuana is the next most detected drug or substance in a driver. If you're going to use the analogy of alcohol, it's like giving somebody 4 beers instead of 2 beers, and that's obviously will increase the risk to public safety itself. In my position as a traffic fatality investigator in 2019, I did pull some stats, and approximately 30% of those cases that we investigate as far as traffic fatality or serious collisions involves drivers testing positive for THC in their system. So if you think of that number at 30%, and then we double the dosage for those drivers, that number will increase. So when we're looking at edibles, you do have that delayed response because obviously edibles, it has to go through the digestive system before it gets absorbed to the bloodstream to exert the effects. Unlike smoking, you feel the effects immediately, but with the delayed response, there's always that risk of overconsumption. And folks that don't feel the effects right away, instead of eating 1 brownie, they eat 2 brownies. By the time that they double up, the overconsumption, when it hits them, they feel the effects greatly. That's probably why we have those high calls for overdoses, and because of that, now we're going to double that and give them additional THC, and I think that's going to create a lot of public safety issues. I know that one of the mention was that it was a cost saving for the production for the state cannabis industry, but in saving that cost, how much will it cost for insurance or our judicial system or the cost of lives, given my position? So our stance as far as law enforcement, we definitely don't support this change because as I mentioned, it will substantially impact public safety.
Okay, thank you. For the recording, Assemblywoman Allard has joined us. Chris, I think you're next. You want to go ahead?
Thank you. So using that reasoning, because we're not talking about consumption controls, we're talking about controls on packaging and volume you can sell. Should we be moving towards limiting beer sales to 5 beers per purchase, or reducing the size of alcohol bottles to only 5 units, like 5 shots?
I think that's
sorry,
Officer Dunn.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I wasn't sure if that's directed towards me. I mean, obviously, people are going to buy as many as they want. However, if you're now giving them twice the dosage, I mean, alcohol and marijuana, it's obviously we have two different impairing substance, but in combination, it's a terrible combination. It increases the effects greatly.
Yeah,
But
no,
as
I
far-
wasn't talking about the combination. I'm talking about packaging in units per volume. That's really what's at stake here. We're not talking about creating a law that says you can only consume 5 milligrams or 10 milligrams. We're talking about packaging and how much we can sell.
Right. So if you were to go and buy 1 package of 5 milligrams and you consume that, and because it's edible, you feel the effects perhaps 30 minutes after the consumption, and you're used to that dosage, and now you have the ability to double that dosage. I think it's going to create havoc. And as far as public safety and driving after the effect, it's just, I gave you the analogy of the 2 beer versus the 4 beers because we're now doubling up the amount of drug or medication that people are getting into their system. And not everybody's going to drive after they consume, but those that do will have the readily or the availability of doubling the dose of consumption. If we package something that's even higher, has a higher, instead of 5 milligrams, it's 10 milligrams.
All right, thank you. Chris, did you want to follow up?
I'm trying to understand, because to me they're parallel issues. It's packaging and volume, and I don't know. I guess maybe we should be looking at alcohol, limiting size and volume of packaging.
Well, we'll look at a separate item on a different agenda. Thanks. Forrest?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a question for Officer Dunn as well. You had mentioned that, I think you said 30% of DUI cases tested positive for THC, and I wanted to understand that stat a little bit. Of those 30%, what percent were only tested positive for THC and got a DUI and had the probable cause to pull them over? What percentage was that combined with something else like alcohol? And then can you test for impairment, or do you just test for the fact that it is in their system, because we know it can stay in folks' system for up to 30 days?
Right. The 30% that I mentioned earlier is actually traffic fatality and serious collisions that come to our office in the fatality investigation. That does not pertain to impaired driving. That's that I don't have that information. Obviously, it's that stat will be underreported as well, because not every driver that we arrest that gives us a breath sample of over an 08 gives us a toxicology for drug testing. So the number, the 30% that I gave you is in 2019 we had 35 cases that came to our office. This is a fatality investigation office, and the 35 cases where we have drivers either that are suspect drivers or drivers that actually have died from crashes. Toxicology that was available for those individuals, 30% of those cases came back with THC positive. And THC positive, when we're looking at that, it could very well be the active THC, the carboxy THC, or the metabolite, the inactive metabolite of carboxy THC. So obviously something happened that caused the operation of a vehicle that ultimately caused a crash where injuries or a fatal or fatality. And out of those that we tested, like I mentioned, it's the availability of toxicology. 30% of those cases came back positive, and the positive cases are as a result of testing from our lab, and our labs have cutoffs, as you know, as far as like what the reporting limit is and what the testing limit is. And as far as like I mentioned earlier, as far as the drivers that are impaired drivers that have been arrested, I don't have those numbers as far as percentage.
Can I do a quick follow-up, Mr. Chair?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so I apologize. I didn't hear that it was the serious crashes versus DUIs. But we were saying you're testing both the people who perhaps were killed or the people who survived but were involved in the crash. 30% had THC on board in some capacity. But of that 30%, well, two questions. First, for people that are killed, are you able to do a test that can detect alcohol, like a blood test? Can you detect alcohol that way? And then again, of those 30%, what portion of those 30% also tested positive for something else?
I didn't pull those numbers as far as in addition to the THC or alcohol. Those that died in crashes and ultimately goes to the medical examiner's office. Typically, alcohol and drugs and medication is what we get back.
Okay.
And the toxicology that we submit, we always test for alcohol and drugs and medication.
Great. Well, I don't think we're going to resolve this today. If we discuss this again and you use that 30% number, I would like to know what portion of that was THC alone and what was several things, including THC?
You got it. You bet.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Forrest. Meg?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is for Officer Dunn. In those statistics, do we have location data as to where those serious crashes and DUIs are occurring? This kind of goes to another issue that we discussed, I believe it was last meeting, about there being no marijuana retail establishments in Eagle River Chugiak area. So I was wondering if you have that breakdown, or if we could maybe see where the instances of DUI and the serious crashes are occurring, maybe the last year or two.
Sure, we do. The case that comes to our office, location is documented as well, because obviously the location of the fatality is our response, and yes, I can certainly get that information as far as location as well.
That'd be very helpful. Thank you.
Yes.
All right, thanks. Dean?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I asked to speak because obviously there's a lot of different, I guess, viewpoints of this proposed state reg change and some relevant data. And I just wanted to, I guess, remind the committee of two things. One was the committee can make a recommendation to the full assembly as to whether there should be a resolution commenting on that's change to the state reg or not. And I think that's sort of the question, one question that you might want to consider. Should the assembly be submitting comments? And obviously each individual member can submit comments as an individual, but do you want the assembly to, as a body, submit some comment? And then the second thing, maybe obviate my first point, is my understanding of the law here is that the municipality can be more restrictive than the state law, the state regulation. And there's no mandate that we change our municipal code, which currently has the 5 milligram per serving and the 50 milligram per packaged unit restriction. So even if the state reg changes, the municipality can keep that more restrictive THC content limits in place. And that might, of course, be some disparity across the state then, but as I understand it, the law allows us to do that. So it's sort of a second question that might come up later. Should we change our code to match this state reg change if that state reg change actually goes through? And so we might be having this conversation again if that question comes before you. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Dean. Chris, comment on that?
No, not on that. I just want to circle back, Mr. Welton, when you suggested that would be another potential conversation regarding the packaging of alcohol. I wasn't suggesting that. I was suggesting that this whole conversation kind of verges on the absurd. You know, if we're fearful of the amount per dose, then the comparable argument would be then we should ban any alcohol products over 50% alcohol, or Everclear, or any number of products. And so if the fear is people are going to have more of a percentage, that's really a self-regulating issue. If the fear is that I understand the fear, I just think that we're once again contemplating treating the cannabis industry with a prohibitionary framework that's based on the ways of the past. We've legalized the product and we should let people make the determination. I mean, I would be interested also, Ms. Harris, to see the percentage of alcohol poisoning calls that we get to the health department or to the fire department and the police department, because if we're going to talk about the ills, and let's compare them so we can understand scale. But this whole argument is just kind of crazy to me. So I am not suggesting the municipality should be telling liquor stores that they can't sell anything over 50% by volume or 80% by volume. In fact, my favorite bourbon is 100 40 proof. And so I don't want people to be told what percentage they can buy. Anyhow, thank you.
Okay. Mandy, don't put that on the agenda yet. Thanks. Okay. Dean, I want to follow up on your comments. So if we have a more restrictive standard, say we stay at the 5 milligrams, and someone buys more potent edibles somewhere else and they're found with that in the city, is that a crime?
That's a nice hypothetical, Mr. Wilton. I think that the restriction, and I need to double check this, so a little caveat there. I think the restriction is on the sale of that much. So if they're purchased out of our jurisdiction, then, our code wouldn't apply. Purchased in our jurisdiction, it's the restriction on the sales of the commercial marijuana. And as far as personal consumption of some content that's more than we allow in sales, I think that we're not regulating that kind of personal consumption. And again, I would need to double check that. But this also, if I could follow on with another point, this might create some, I guess, enforcement disparities. So the state, as we know, AMCO and their enforcement and our code enforcement office, they work together and sometimes complement each other. But if we have two different standards, I'm not sure we would need to talk to them. But my sort of prediction is the state isn't going to enforce the 5 milligram per serving or 50 milligram per packaged unit standard. And that would be solely up to our local jurisdiction code enforcement to do that. So I don't think the state would expend their resources to do that for us within the municipality's jurisdiction. But again, take that with a grain of salt and ask the enforcement folks.
Okay, thank you. Crystal?
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I think Officer Dunn's comments or points that he was bringing up are really valid. And I think if we were looking at doubling the intensity of alcohol right now, we'd be having the same kind of conversation. So, I think that's what we're looking at, is the fact that we're doubling the intensity of a product. And so anyway, I think one of the things that was really concerning to me was the fact that we have departments in our municipality that aren't even made aware of some of these changes when they do come up. And so I'm just very appreciative of both Ms. Harris and Officer Dunn being here to really talk about some of the implications, the things that they are concerned about, because I think those are all valid. And, if we hadn't brought that up and asked them to come in and talk about it, they wouldn't even have been made aware of some of these potential changes that they believe can have more harm than we've already seen. So anyway, I appreciate the conversation. I'm not sure exactly what this committee will do with this information, but I absolutely think that it's worthy enough of a good discussion. And I think we probably will continue part of this discussion in the Public Safety Committee because we do have the full body of assembly members there at that point. But again, it is interesting to me that so many of these kinds of things kind of go under the radar at some point. So I'm glad that we've brought this up and been able to have a conversation. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure. Pete?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And my question is, do we know that, the folks that are calling AFD about overdoses, do we know if the overdose was caused by buying legally marketed marijuana, or was it possible that they bought marijuana and marijuana products on the black market? Do we have any information about that? Thank you.
Guess is that to Ms. Harris?
Or Mr. Dunn, maybe.
Okay.
The overdoses that we call, we don't have that data. I'm not sure how we can collect that data. And I mean, just right off the top, my assumption would be edibles. I mean, typically you don't have somebody that smokes marijuana and smokes it to the point where they OD. And you're looking at the consumption of extracts that are higher THC content or edibles because of the delayed response. And because of the delayed response, we always have that fear of overconsumption. And as it all hits you after overconsumption, that point is like, oh my God, something's going on. I better call for the medics. So I would imagine that when we have these calls for overconsumption or OD, it has to pertain, I would think, to edibles or the consumption of extracts.
And from the health department perspective, that's what we saw as well, is that the risk of poisoning or overdoses from edibles could be higher because smoked cannabis, because as the ingested marijuana takes longer for the product to induce the drug effect than from smoking marijuana necessarily.
All right, thank you.
All right, thanks.
Chris, are you back in on this?
I am. Just two things.
Okay,
Interesting, so if we're looking at the public health perspective, then we should never have legalized this, because anything in your lungs is worse than nothing in your lungs, but eating it is not okay because it's scary. It feels a bit reaper madness still. And I'm not saying you are dramatizing it. This conversation is happening across the country. It's not solely to Anchorage. And back to what I heard about the potential of doubling the alcohol content. This is not possible. Everclear is sold in percentages of 60, 75.5, 94.5, and 95% of alcohol. And so if we figure out some way to concentrate past 100%, I'm sure there will be a market for it. But frankly, it's an absurd comparison to say if we were doing this with alcohol, then we would be having this conversation. It's just not possible because the market is established and you can buy what you want.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Meg?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering if, and I know it would be a little bit more work for the departments, so I apologize for that up front. But if the health department and APD could summarize or put together their opinions in writing with whatever they're citing to, so that way we have some time, particularly, for members who aren't at this meeting. I know it might come up at public safety, but we're all working from a set of core documents. Similarly, if we get poison control information or additional information from AFD, it seems like it would be really great to have written information we can review, dig into, and then come back with specific questions in whichever forum exists as we determine if this committee or another will be making a recommendation about particular comments on this regulation to the state or how it affects the local policy.
All right, thanks, Meg. And I think that's probably something we should head towards.
Mr. Chair, just briefly
Chris,
on
go
that.
ahead.
Yeah, I would ask that we have real numbers and percentages, not just percentages, because percentages tend to be scarier than real numbers.
Okay. Mr. Foster, you're here, and I wonder if you had something to add. Dean had mentioned that enforcement might be an issue. Do you have any thoughts on this whole thing? Did I get that right? Is Jack here, Mandy? Oh.
I see him. He's on mute.
Jack stepped away.
Oh, yeah, I don't see him anymore.
Oh, okay. Well, that'd be something. I guess we could contact him later. So, looking at this, so we comments to AMCO need to be in by when, Mandy?
March 5th.
Okay, March 5th. Crystal, when is the Public Safety Committee?
That's on Wednesday, March the 3rd.
Oh, cutting it close. So if we were to, that's a little bit late then. If we addressed it then and then had a resolution to the assembly, full body at a normal meeting, that would be, would miss the deadline.
That is true. I understand they're meeting on March 31st on the issue, I believe. So I don't know if they'll take comments late or not. But I can ask that question.
Mandy, is that written comments, and do they have like a public hearing?
Yes, that's correct. So that's written comments. So that would be stuff that would be provided to the board along with all of the documentation. But they do allow for people to come and do public testimony at the meetings.
Okay, and just, we had done that a couple of years ago on a liquor license where I think we had a recommendation or a comment, and I went to the public meeting and kind of presented our comments at that. So that's something that can be done. So an alternative is we address this again. When do we have another meeting this month? I guess ours would have the same issue though. What's our schedule look like, Mandy?
So our next meeting is March 4th.
Okay, so that won't work.
Ms. Sawyer is in the queue with a question regarding testimony.
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Sure, go ahead.
This is Jane Sawyer for EMCO, for the record. I just wanted to clarify that as of today, there is not going to be an oral testimony for this regulation. The board has not indicated that they are going to do that. It's only going to be written testimony.
Oh. Okay. Okay. Any thoughts on that from the committee? If we want to do written, then we need to have something at our meeting on the 23rd, right? When's our, sorry, looking, what's our first March meeting? March meeting is the 9th, so it has to be. I mean, any one of us could, it'd be nice to get the written information from the departments before, at some point soonish. I mean, if any one of us could prepare a resolution for Tuesday. I don't know, any thoughts from the committee on how to proceed?
Yes, Mr. Chair, this is Meg.
Meg, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think it would be worth reaching out to AMCO to see if, with the timing of our meetings and the fact that we could still submit something by March 9th, if a resolution from a governing jurisdiction came in, if they would consider it. I think it's worth asking the question. I know it wouldn't be in their normal regulatory comment period, but I think that's worth asking, so then we can know if we need to hurry faster than that. I will say, for my own purposes, I don't know that necessarily commenting on the state regulations is the highest and best use of our time, whereas we're going to, once the state makes its determination, we're going to have to take this up in our local jurisdiction. So I think that that's actually where it's more important for us to dig in as to our own ordinances and regulations.
Right, and that's been our typical, we've been very reactive when they've made changes and just modified our code. But, I think this one rose for some members to a level that, it's worth contemplating a comment. So, so Ms. Sawyer, how would that work then? What's AMCO's thoughts? Do we get special treatment?
Through the chair, you don't get special treatment, but I can ask that question to our attorney. What happens if we receive comments, not only yours, but other comments that are after the deadline? I can ask that question to her, yes.
Okay. When can you get back to us?
Let me write it down. I can send an answer to Mandy, probably by the end of the week. I don't know what today is. I think it's Thursday or early next week. Is that good?
I suppose it cuts it close because if we were to do something at a regular meeting, that's Tuesday.
Okay, then let me get with her, with our attorney, and then I'll let Mandy know. It's just, our attorney is also really busy and I don't necessarily get answers back right away from her.
Okay. Yeah, appreciate that. And yeah, if you contact Mandy, she'll let us know.
Okay,
So,
I will do that. Thank you.
all right, Jamie, you have a thought? Jamie? You're
Yeah,
silent. There you go.
Can you hear me? I'm sorry, I'm commuting. Is it possible that we can also get real numbers? Because we've been using real numbers throughout the entire COVID on case counts, positives, negatives, and death. And I think it's important that we follow through with that precedence. And I'd like to see real numbers when it comes to the thing that we just talked about with Officer Dunn and the statistics. So if Officer Dunn can also produce real numbers, I would greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely, I can certainly do that.
Okay, thanks. Forrest?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I guess with regard to a resolution or the committee making a recommendation to the full body on resolution, I think my preference would be that we not do so for two main reasons. One, because I'm just sort of reading the room here. I don't think we're going to get to the level of unanimity that typically makes a resolution sort of more effective. And that's not always a reason to not pass it or not have a debate. But if we send something to AMCO that's like a 6-4 passes 6-4, I'm not sure if that is very useful for them. The other thing I'll say is for those members that really do feel passionately about this, you can write a letter and you can even use the clerk's office to get other members of the body to sign it. And we've done that a number of times on different issues, not to AMCO, but on other issues where we're commenting to the federal delegation or to a federal rulemaking body. And so I would prefer that we not take a position as a committee, and that the members that feel they want to would pursue the letter writing process. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Question to the department. So Ms. Harris and Officer Dunn, so these are issues for your departments. Do you ever send comments on pending rule changes to the state? Kind of, independent of the assembly?
From the health department, this is Heather Harris. I'm not positive about the answer to that, about our history and how we've done that. I think on this issue in particular, we were providing this information to the committee itself, and given that the health department doesn't have a deep expertise in substance misuse, I'm not sure that would be a position or a step forward that the department is interested in taking at this point. We're interested in providing the information that we can to the assembly people based on data and information that we can find in association with substance misuse issues, and in response to about getting the real numbers. I'm happy to pull that information together and make sure that we've got some written statements and information that you guys can have access to and go straight to those sources themselves. I think that's really helpful, and we're happy to do that.
Okay, thank you. Officer Dunn, does APD ever go comment to the state or legislature?
Mr. Chair, I'm not aware that we've done that. However, I can certainly look into it. But same with Ms. Harris, we can certainly provide you with the numbers that you need for these instead of percentages.
Okay. All right. So here we are. it's been a good discussion. Interesting. I think I mean, our timeline is tight if we were to do an official resolution. Alternative is what Meg had mentioned is, typically should the rule be changed, and I guess we know in April sometime, then we just deal with it like we've had other changes. Is how do we change our code or not? Do you expect to have this on the agenda for the Public Safety Committee then, Crystal?
Well, Cameron and I had talked about that yesterday, and we haven't finalized our agenda yet, but it's the comments about it are certainly on there. I don't know if we want to have a full discussion, but from a public safety perspective, it's certainly an item of interest. So I believe it will be on there, and if it helps to kind of promote a better conversation, I'm sure we'd be happy to make sure that it's on there for a full discussion. Thanks.
So, Mr. Chair, I will just take an affirmative step right now and ask the committee, does the committee recommend forwarding a comment to AMCO? And I don't know if I need to put that in the form of a motion. I would ask people to vote no, but let's just dispense with the question by asking this body if a majority supports moving forward.
How is that? How would we word that? You want to make a motion, so you move.
So
you moved
I
to send a resolution, right? It's in the affirmative.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you urge a no vote.
Yes, that's the motion.
Okay, is there a second for that?
Second.
That's Meg. Okay.
Correct.
Mandy, do you want to do a roll call?
Yes. Get it open. Okay, so I had Mr. Constant and Miss Zalatel for the first and second. So Mr. Weddleton,
No.
Miss Kennedy,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
No.
Mr. Constant,
No.
Mr. Dunbar,
No.
Miss Zalatel.
No.
I have 1 yes, 5 no's.
Okay. All right. So I think it's a clear message. We won't send. We would not recommend sending a resolution on this. So given that, I mean, there's still alternatives. I mean, any individual could send something. And I just wonder on the Public Safety Committee, if the goal isn't to send a comment in, then it seems like that would be an early discussion. It might be better to hold that off until we see what AMCO does. But that's Crystal, that's I guess for you and Cameron to decide.
Yeah, we'll talk about it because we did have these conversations. We had some of this conversation already, but anyway, yes, we will decide. Thank you.
Okay. Any more on this? Is there, I guess anyone from the public want to chime in? Perhaps a moment late. Okay. *6 if you're on the phone. Okay, hearing from no one. Okay, so we have half an hour to go, and we could continue on our proposed changes to Title 1080 regarding marijuana. At our meeting on January 21st, we got through page 13, I believe. At our previous meeting, Dean wasn't there, so we did not go through that document, but we looked at various protected uses and got partway through that. Does the committee have a preference on we could continue through the protected uses, or we could just keep working our way through the draft document? Okay. Crystal, got a thought? Okay, well, hearing nothing, then I will.
Sorry, yeah, I'm just, it's like, yeah, what do we want to do? Yeah.
We're close on the thing with the protected uses is we got through discussion at Harry McDonald Center, I think. Then community centers, neighborhood recreation centers, religious assemblies, and so on, I think are still. So we were just going through that and that was the list. And then Ryan, yeah, we might, I don't know, Ryan's not here. Is Ryan here? Mandy?
Mr. Chair, this is Ryan Yell. I'm here.
Oh, you are here. Oh, okay. Well, that's good. Welcome. And we may be able to finish this discussion. But I think with the longer document, we would just get through another few pages and not finish that. So that might be better for the next meeting to try to wrap that one up. So let's go ahead. Do people have that in front of them? Was this posted, Mandy, the information on the protected uses?
I did not post it as a handout for this one, but I'm checking to grab it from one of the previous.
And actually, now I look, maybe we shouldn't do this because the agenda says changes to Title 1080, and that's a Title 21. I mean, in my mind, it's all part of the same package.
Yeah, I didn't post that portion of it. I just did the version 4 draft that Dean had been working from.
Okay, well, I will reverse course then. Sorry, folks. Let's just look at that then and see if we can get through some more of that. So we were at page 13 on that. And had gone through line 7. I think Megan had a comment. So do people have that in front of them? Let's go ahead and go through that. So Dean, do you want to just lead us through for the next half hour on, or 25 minutes on this document, starting at page 13?
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Okay,
so I'm not really sure I have much of a choice in how I answer that question, but I'm happy to go through for the next half hour. But I just shared the document. Can you all see it on screen?
Let's see. Yes.
Okay. So, and yes, Mr. Webton's right. And line numbers might be a little different, but yeah, we stopped here on January 21st, and we're in the section about processing applications and the denial. And let's see. I guess, and I might rely on Mandy and Ryan to help me remember some of the changes and what they're for. But again, it's generally, most all of them are just to follow what the state regulation changes are for the past year or so. So here, after reviewing the renewal application, no, excuse me, a new application. That this is a requirement to deny an application if these are met. And I guess we're deleting revoked for any cause, perhaps. And I'm not sure, it's probably just because that aligns with, well, if the license is revoked, you get an application from the same applicant, they're applying for a new one, and you will look at their history. And maybe they're rehabilitated, or maybe the revocation was for something sort of de minimis. I'm not sure, but they're taking this out as you've ever had something revoked, a prior license revoked, it's not immediately a mandate to deny a new application. And then these other two new lines, to me, are just some common sense additions here. And this number 5 is probably grown out of some of the situations that AMCO and that we have seen over the past couple years. Let's see. So I guess going on to the changes, next is, this is the discretionary denial, subsection C. And
actually, Dean, hold off.
Transfer. Sure.
Dean, so looking at line 11, it says the assembly will deny an application. So we have phrases in legal stuff: will, shall, may. What does will deny mean? Is that shall?
Yeah, you know, a lot of places the word will is used, and in general legal drafting, we would use the word shall. There, I guess I would interpret this as being synonymous. And it was just an effect of, I guess, this whole chapter being drafted by a large group as we were trying to get this ramped up for the new industry back in 2016. And but this, I think, is saying if the Assembly finds these things that it's required to deny, that's a shall effect.
Yes, there's the nuances of legal language is not always obvious to people, so, or including me. So I just wanted to check. Thank you. So go ahead. If there's no comments from the committee, we're kind of rolling down to part C.
So, and part C is for transfers or transfers of controlling interest. And again, it's a discretionary standard here, but I think this is only here. And you know what? I'm actually thinking that this is a change in the state reg, but it's probably not something we need in our code because we are the local governing body. So it's in our jurisdiction. There's no other local governing body here. So perhaps it would be better phrased as, and we again drafted this ordinance to just reflect the state reg changes for discussion here. But I'm thinking that perhaps this should say, if community councils which get to comment or public comment, if their protests to a transfer are not arbitrary, capricious, or unreasonable. But again, that's not quite the same relationship. Community councils to the assembly in this regulatory structure, it's not the same relationship as local governments to AMCO and state. So I don't know if that is a good idea or not yet. But I do think that protest by the local governing body is probably not the right phrasing here for our code, although it fits in state reg.
So would you just make that more explicit that a protest by the assembly is not arbitrary?
Sort of like this. Yeah.
Okay. Crystal, as we go through this, we've of course talked about what triggers assembly review, and it's kind of in this section here. It seems like. Have you looked at this and thought about ways where? I mean, the top section B kind of says we will deny in those cases, so certainly we'd be reviewing it.
Well, I'm not sure exactly what your question
Sorry, I'm
is.
trying to find that.
Yeah, because we do have that in there, but that's for the renewal. Just the idea of taking a second look at it and sending it to the committee.
Right.
Sending it back to the committee for just a further review. So a little bit of a different effort there.
Yeah. Okay, I just want to make sure we have all that stuff clear. So, okay. So go ahead, Dean.
Sorry here, I guess, same thing. So, okay, I'll make a note of that. So D, there's no change. Should I continue on here?
Yes, please.
So appeals, there's no change. The appeal from a decision of the Assembly still goes to the Superior Court if there's a denial. And then our fees section, and we had some discussion about that. And again, we are at 0 for all of them, but we're just making changes that are, I guess, sort of cosmetic to reflect that this includes endorsements, and not just new, but also renewed. And this is just reflecting that state language changes. Same here for cultivation, new or renewed, and new or renewed manufacturing, on-site consumption. They're all 0, so there's no real effect to, I guess, how we operate our licensing oversight. So now getting out of those general Article 1 provisions for license administration, we've got the retail marijuana stores changes. And let's see. This change, Mandy perhaps can help me here. Is this related to COVID-19 changes for I sort of need to look that up again. It's a little remote from time now since I last looked at it.
Yeah, this was for the COVID extension.
Okay. And I think that must mean that curbside, selling curbside or drive-through.
Okay. Is Miss Sawyer still here?
I am.
So curious on this. So AMCO, if I understand right, correct me if I'm wrong. So AMCO kind of created this possibility for marijuana shops to during COVID, and was this March 23rd deadline? When they did that, they said that's the deadline for it, or expiration date.
March 20. Oh, okay. Let me look at the comment. Hold on. Unless made permanent. Okay, so there's actually an advisory that I am getting that has been sent out to the licensees and that I will be sending out to the local governments myself and explaining what that is. But essentially, this regulation as of yesterday, as of when the governor did not extend the declaration, is no longer active.
Okay.
So because of the technicalities of an emergency regulation, we had to make it permanent in quotations, but it was dependent on the governor or the legislature extending the declaration, which neither of them did. So it is no longer active. It's gonna stay on the books. You know, the language is gonna stay on the books, but it's not active unless the declaration is extended again. So it's a little bit complicated.
Okay, it is complicated.
Yeah.
So were the emergency declaration extended or proclamation? Is that deadline March 23rd? Was that in AMCO's ruling?
The March 23rd deadline was the expiration of the emergency regulation, but the emergency regulation is dependent on the declaration.
Okay. Okay. So we just should not spend much time on this. We don't, well, I don't know. I guess we don't. I guess, Dean, is there a harm having it in there?
I guess the only harm is someone who's reading or researching this and what it means might be confused for a little bit before they figure out that it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, I guess they'd operate under the state and the city permit. The state permit would say, no, you can't do that, no matter what ours said in that case. Chris, you got a comment?
Yeah, thank you. It's very interesting that this is here before us right now. In the context of marijuana, and I'm going to diverge slightly, I'm not really so interested in the issue of allowing the sales off premises. I don't think it's a big priority for retailers. However, on the alcohol side of the question, which is similarly regulated by AMCO, I have been kind of tilting at a windmill of attempting to permanently encode the allowance for service of alcohol and food on off-premise locations, like on the sidewalk in front of the restaurant or road closure or parking lots. And so I want folks to know that I'm working on this and I'm going to be bringing something forward. I have yet to be able to determine whether there is any barrier at AMCO, at the state, to us changing this. I was told by our staff that it's a state law issue, but I've been told by the industry that it's a local code issue. And so I just want folks to know that that's a project that I'm starting to pick up, figure out how after COVID, we can keep some of the great things that have happened, like restaurants being able to serve under umbrellas in front of their premise. Sorry for that divergence, but I wanted to.
No, that's good. It's good to know. We have something coming up Tuesday that is relevant to that. So, okay.
Through the chair,
So,
may I comment?
Yeah, please.
This is Jane again with the Alcohol Marijuana Control Office. So I just wanted to expand upon Mr. Constant, I believe that's his last name, I'm sorry. So what he's talking about is the AB 15 that some of the restaurants or bars or whoever have signed off by us at the alcohol meeting. I think it was 2 days ago. They opted to leave that as is for now, because this is not a regulation. This was a policy that they made because of COVID-19. So the AB 15 is still valid. So they can still have, in general, I don't know who has what. They can still have their umbrellas outside of their businesses if they have an AB 15 that is signed off by our office.
And Mr. Chair, then if I could follow up.
Sure.
Is AB 15, I think I just understood you say that is not part of the COVID pandemic, but it now just exists?
It was originally part of the COVID pandemic, but it's not in regulation. So it was a policy that the board made. So 2 days ago, they opted to leave that as is for now. And I think they're going to take it up again at their March meeting and reassess. But as of today, it's still a valid application if the establishment actually has an AB 15 signed off by our office.
Right. And so this is so interesting. The AB 15 could be rescinded then by just simple act of the board, right?
Yes, and actually, before I forget, there's another advisory that I'm planning on sending out. I'm sorry, I have a lot of things to do. And that advisory does say, okay, it's in place, but if your local government has a problem with it, then your local government's rules supersede.
So, and that's awesome. For my part, I want to figure out how to get the board to commit to permanently making this part of the rules, and us as well, so that we don't ever have to go back to where instead of being outside and enjoying the sunshine in the summer, you have to hide inside of your restaurant or bar under the roof. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Well, appreciate that diversion from both of you. Okay, so we've got a little bit of time here. So, I mean, just the committee here, should we leave this in the marijuana code? It's somewhat in flux. Dean, could this citation change if it were made kind of permanent through the state, not tied to COVID-19?
Well, sometimes we do have citations to state statute or regulation in our code from years ago, and that state law numbering was changed. And it sort of takes some legal research to figure out, but if it's tied to the same regulation, just with a different number or citation, it's usually interpreted. I mean, if you can show the legislative history, it's intended to be the same thing, regulate the same thing, and so forth, and it's just a numbering change, that would have the same effect. So it just takes some legal research to connect those dots. So even if it's a different number, it would be okay. It's just more challenging. Somebody asks to figure out what happened, what the new citation is, and if that's still effective for the same purpose it was cited for in our law, in our code, if that makes sense.
Okay, no, that's helpful. Ms. Sawyer's listening. She'll make sure they don't change that number.
So,
Before we move on.
Thank you, Mr. Sawyer.
Yeah, Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, so if that section there, that or as permitted by, do we want, can we, should we, is it out of style to put in a little phrase that's like state law notwithstanding, so that at the front, so that people don't fall into that confusion of, well, it says I can do it here, so I should do it, right? Is there a phrase we could plug in there that, even though it says as permitted under, is state law notwithstanding, or something that doesn't assert that the state allows it, but instead says, look at the state law?
I'm not sure if I understood that right. Be like this. I'm going to look at the wording there. But I think Mr. Constantini not saying if permitted by state law, but saying notwithstanding what state law says about it. So just
well, I think your phrase, if permitted by state law, is fair as well. I think hopefully what those two things say the same thing, but rather than saying as permitted by 3AAC, blah, 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 state, if allowed under state law, notwithstanding state law, whatever the phrase would be, to say, essentially, we allow it if the state allows it.
Well, that's kind of the wording we have there then. I mean,
see, what it looks to me like is that the state law code right there allows it, right, as permitted, as opposed to if permitted. I think that's a subtle but important change.
Well, I think either wording would work in terms of saying, well, we're going to allow, we're not going to be less restrictive than state law. Whatever the state law allows, that's permitted by them, or if permitted by them, that's the extent we're going, rather than being less restrictive.
Yeah, okay, so I'm okay either way, really, but I think as permitted alludes toward us saying they allow it, if permitted raises the question. So, but that's fine detail.
Okay. Well, we are running out of time here, so we're through A1. I recommend we stop now. I'll ask for public comments. We have another meeting, I think, right at 11, don't we? Is that next meeting? Oh, it's 11:10. Okay. Okay. I want to get kind of a clean ending point here. So I think, yeah, so is that okay? Any opposition to that? We'll just call it the end of page 15.
No, that's good.
And then that'll give, if any, we've got a few people from the public here. Does that work, folks? Let's do that. Call for public comments. I guess actually we had one other agenda item, which I guess we continuously just skip, which is the legislative priorities, which the chair has asked for. And I don't think we
Mr.
have
Chair?
time for that.
I
Chris?
just would add to that list right now, extension of outdoor service for licensed premises.
Oh, I gotcha.
So let's add that specifically to that list and make it a concrete work plan.
Okay. That's not really budget request though. That's like a
You said
legislative. Sorry, I said
legislative.
legislative. Yeah, sorry.
So, I'm
Reading
just
the
following your
agenda.
words. Yeah. But for the purposes of legislation, I would like us to add that.
Okay. Oh, that's a good thought. Thanks.
Well, and budget priorities will be if a new Recovery Act is passed, we have a process for getting public input.
Okay. Okay. Public comments. Anyone from the public like to speak? I think if you're on the phone, you can hit *6 and tell us your name.
Hello.
Sure. Go ahead.
Hello.
Is that Eugene?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Good morning. I'll set my timer, but I'll be brief. My name is Eugene Carl Haberman. I follow the public process when the public process is inappropriate decision made by the governing body or likely public interest. I can't help but notice for the meeting, and this is not criticism among the assembly members of the committee or that, but you're seeing a situation and you're starting to say certain issues, get certain issues as a result of the governor's declaration of not doing a continued declaration. Now you're seeing certain issues that you're saying, oh, what happens now? What happens now that certain things were done during the declaration that was going on for some time and continued until now? Now, how do you react to that and how do you respond to that? But I think the primary response should be from everybody is that we are still in an emergency. The governor has felt that first he was saying that saying to the legislature, I think you should pass it. Then, because of the organization problem with the legislature, they didn't get it done by deadline. And then the governor makes a statement that, well, I'm not going to go and continue the emergency because that the number of cases are going down with vaccination, and if it changes, so then I'll address it. Well, that's not a response. That's an irresponsible leadership in dealing with the COVID. He continues to provide a false sense of security that he's done since day one. And it's put in a situation where, because of that failure of the governor, it's led people to say, oh, it's pretty much over. And there's evidence, particularly out in the valley, that that is the sentiment. And note this, that people coming into the state now, the efforts of the requirement about being checked is now moved away. But fortunately for the seafood industry, they're still requiring it. And how do you get a real testing of numbers and what is in the state with this lack of leadership? And I'm sure you're torn. You're trying to get things right for everybody, and you have difficult decisions. But this is not making it any easier for everybody. It's making it more difficult, and we're not working together. We're working apart. And I wish you all the best. And also, I missed part of your meeting, but I really appreciate that when I do miss part of the meeting, you do have recordings, and the public can go there and listen to those parts that we missed. Thank you for that.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Haberman. Is there anyone else like to speak? Okay, hearing no one. Move to adjourn. Anyone?
Move to adjourn.
All right. Thanks, everyone. See you in a few minutes.